Hello everyone. This short presentation is meant to give you some background into how people learn best. And by knowing this, it's hoped that you will then apply some of what you learned in your study practice to be effective in this class and in every class that you take in the future. So I want to start out by saying that the way you studied in high school might be good enough for studying in college, but for many students, they find out when they get to college, it's not quite good enough. So for many college classes, they're going to require a significantly greater commitment than what you put in previous classes. And as we go through this, I'm going to be citing evidence to back this information up. So neuroscience researchers have made it clear that learning is an active process and learning takes work. Now, don't let this scare you, because I will also give you an opportunity for putting in place a plan to help you through the learning process. But let's take a look at how learning happens in the first place. So, studying is a skill that can be improved upon. Now, there's a couple of different ways of looking at things like learning. Very common way, and actually the way I'd like you to really focus on, is something called the growth mindset. And if you approach learning from the growth mindset, what the growth mindset says is that we have the potential to change, we have the potential to grow, we have the potential to learn new things. And that includes learning to be a more effective student. And that's important because the reason why we're talking about this is so that you can put in place a plan for being successful in this class. Now, the opposite of the growth mindset is a fixed mindset. And people who have a fixed mindset say, I am who I am, there's nothing I can do to change it, and I'm going to stay who I am right now. And if you have this fixed mindset when it comes to learning, you say things like, I can't learn better study habits, and you use negative self-fulfilling prophecies. And a negative self-fulfilling prophecy is where you tell yourself something like, well, I can't do an essay question, and I'm not good at testing, and I'm not this, and I'm not that. And the problem with giving yourself all those negative messages is that if you continue to do that, you begin to believe it. And then, why would you apply yourself to putting effort into a class to be successful if you don't really think you can be successful in the first place? So I want you to try to move away from this fixed mindset thinking that you've done stuff in the past and that's just who you plan on being, or that's who all you can be. And I want you to really be focused on this growth mindset, which says you can learn new things. You can do things differently. Just because you've had problems with things in the past doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have problems with them going forward into the future. So don't fall into this trap of having a fixed mindset with things. You do have the ability to learn new ways to be more successful. You can learn the material in this class, and you can go on to do wonderful things. So let's look real briefly at how learning happens. What physically happens inside of your brain when you learn something? So inside your brain are cells called neurons. And these neurons are actually able to grow and make connections between each other in something that's called a synapse. Okay, and synapses are made when we learn new things. So learning literally causes physical changes in your brain. You actually make new synapses. Now, if you don't use a synapse, it's broken down. You don't need it anymore. So when we learn, we want to activate what we've learned several times. So we want to read over information several times. We want to use this information. We want to talk to somebody with it. We want to use some practice problems. And when you do that with those information, those synapses are strengthened and they're kept for a longer term. So we're able to keep those memories. We're able to keep that information for the long term. And these synapses, when we use the information, are not broken. So they're able to be kept. So in order for us to learn something, we've got to use that material multiple times over multiple study sessions, and we need to test ourselves over how much we remember. And if there's something that we don't remember, we got to go back and practice it so that we can strengthen those synapses so that they can stick around for a while. Here's a neat little flow chart that kind of emphasizes what I've been trying to talk about. So you've got information coming in. The first memory that is activated is a little something called sensory memory. And sensory memory is only good for about 1 to 3 seconds. So if this information is coming in and you deem it to be important, you're going to pay attention to it. And by paying attention to it, you're going to strengthen that synapse and that memory will be around for longer. If that sensory information is coming in and you don't deem it important, you're going to forget it. And literally what's happening is those synapses are broken and that information will not be remembered. So by paying attention to sensory memory, you can shove that stuff into short-term memory. Once information is in short-term memory, you need to use it. So you need to rehearse something that you did. You need to repeat it, what you learned. You need to retrieve, think about what you learned, see if you can remember it without looking at something in a book. And by doing that, you're strengthening those synapses and you're changing short-term memory into long-term memory. Okay? As long as you're doing the 3 R's, rehearsal, repetition, and retrieval. If, however, you don't use that information that's in short-term memory, again, those synapses are going to be broken down and that information is forgotten. So what you'll want to do is you want to, when we learn something, put it into long-term memory. And by continuing to use it and practice it over time, that long-term memory can be kept for hours, and then the more you practice it, it can be kept up for days and months and years and for the rest of your life. So successful students in this class are going to plan their study times and plan their study strategies. So you want to do things like set up a schedule of the days and times that you want to study, and preferably do it in the times when you're more awake and alert, right? Because if you're planning on studying at midnight and you're exhausted, well, chances are you're not going to remember that stuff very well. And it's especially important if you can put together a schedule that you stick with it and you just make it part of your weekly routine. And then it's not something you have to plan for. It's not something you have to think about. At this particular day, at this particular time, that's when you're studying for this class. I'd encourage you to study in a good, read that as a quiet environment, someplace with a lot of light, perhaps someplace where you can spread out your books and your laptop and everything that you need so that you have all of that right at the tip of your fingers. You'll want to use multiple study strategies. So you'll want to learn something by reading it, then perhaps you're going to want to rewrite it. Perhaps you're going to get a study group together and you can talk about this information with other people. You can come to one of my live Zooms and we can talk about this. All of those things cause you to be accessing that information, and it strengthens those synapses so that that information isn't lost. And then you got to test yourself on how much you remember and then practice the stuff that you don't. And you want to keep practicing that stuff. So you don't want to just study until you get something right once. You want to study until every time you recall it, you don't get it wrong anymore. And that's really crucial. Other things you can do is scan through the textbook or the lab book before the lesson. By scanning through it, you're putting some of that information into short-term and perhaps long-term memory. And then when we talk about it in class, you've got it there and you can strengthen those synapses. Make sure you're in class. And watching the videos, taking notes, all these types of things, making sure that you're keeping those synapses. A really good strategy is to find where the notes and the book discuss the same thing, because chances are if it's in the notes and it's in the book, that's something that would be really testable. So you want to review material that we've talked about. You want to quiz yourself on that material, quiz yourself on everything, especially the information that you're having trouble with. And occasionally, every once in a while, go back over older stuff. Again, because by pulling those memories out, you're strengthening those synapses, making them less likely that they're going to be broken down, or the proper term for that is remodeled. And especially you want to talk about what you've learned with others. All these things are going to make it more likely that you're going to keep this information in the long term. So I can't emphasize enough, cramming does not work in the long term. So if you're cramming for a test, yeah, perhaps it'll work in the short term and you can remember it long enough for the test. But see, the problem is cramming for information, that information is not transferred into long-term memory. So synapses are going to be broken or remodeled. And remember, the finals in this class are comprehensive. So if you cram, chances are you're going to forget most of the material and you're going to have to go back and relearn it before the final exam. And that's not a very efficient use of your time. Unfortunately, not all CLC students, and actually not all students in college right now, use good study strategies. So here's some information that we collected from the spring of 2021, where a survey was done at College Lake County, and a survey was done community colleges all throughout the United States. So in the CLC, we surveyed 1,003 students. Throughout the United States, we surveyed 189,000 people. It's part of a nationwide CESI survey. You might have participated in that. And what's really scary is when one of the questions asked, how many hours do you spend in a typical 7-day week doing things like studying here? So studying, reading, rehearsing, homework, etc. At CLC, less than, well, let's see here. So we got 1%, 30%, 32. So about 63% of students were studying 10 hours or less. Okay, and that's no matter how many classes they took, whether they're taking one class or they're taking multiple classes. Nationwide, the percent is about the same, right? So a lot of students are not studying enough in college. So you want to set up a good study strategy, consistent, and stick with it. Sleep is also important when it comes to learning. So it, meaning sleep, seems to be important for the formation of long-term memories. This suggests, for instance, the futility of students doing all-nighters of studying. It turns out that getting a good night's sleep might be the most helpful thing you can do in preparing for an exam. Getting a good night's sleep, especially consistently. If you're not getting between 7.5 and 9 hours of sleep each night, you are likely sabotaging your own learning. And sleep also facilitates the encoding of new memories. So there's some evidence to show that in our sleep, we go back over the things that we learned. So that helps to strengthen those synapses, helps to keep them from being broken down. And if you're not getting enough sleep, that might not be happening. Exercise is important in learning. So some new research shows that exercise leads to improved learning and improved memory. Now, you don't have to be a marathon runner. Things like walking, shooting some basketball, sitting on a balance ball, doing yoga, martial arts, or dancing. All of these things actually make it so that you learn more effectively. Because when we are doing that exercise, it's going to be causing the release of neurotransmitters, these chemicals that are going to be released in a synapse, in between those nerve cells, that are going to allow you to do things like improve your focus, improve your motivation, elevate your mood, and help with self-discipline. So are you ready to plan to study to be successful? Well, don't forget, the Student Success Plan is being offered for points this semester, and it has a number of different parts. So you assess your learning styles, you identify and organize your priorities, it gives you an opportunity to put together a study calendar, and then there's the Meet the Teacher assignment where you answer some questions and then share all of this with me. And more information about the study plan is in Canvas under the Week 1 module. Certainly you can come talk to me during a live Zoom and I can work with you on that too. And I'm even offering a little extra credit for doing a dream board, which works towards, why do you want to take this class? What are your goals and what are you planning to do to be successful in order to reach them? Thanks for your time. Please consider what we talked about here as you're planning to be successful in this class. And again, don't forget to let me know if there's anything I can do to help. Thanks, folks. Take care.